All right, let's do a classic paragraph proof in geometry. So this problem says, right here, it tells us given, that's the problem I just circled, given angle A equals angle E in the two pictures below, and it wants us to prove that angle D equals angle H. So first step in triangle proof is kind of look at the problem and come up with a plan. And so I'm looking at this, and you kind of have to have maybe your textbook open or online somewhere where you have all your properties, your geometry properties that might pertain to this. Transitive, reflexive, supplementary, complementary angles. If it happens to be parallel lines and transversals, you might want to use some of those properties. But for this one, we don't have any parallel lines. They just tell us that angle A right here equals angle E. So I'm thinking to myself, well, I know that angle A has to equal angle D because those are vertical angles, and angle E has to equal angle H. Oh, that's perfect. They want me to prove that angle D and H are equal. So I can see logically how I'm going to get to the answer, and hopefully you can see that too. But now, and for some people, the tricky part is to come up with the written out the two paragraph or the two column proof. And so let me show you how you do that. So first of all, always start with your given. So 1, and write out numbers to angle A equals, I should say is congruent to angle E, and the reason for number 1 is that it's given. All right. So number 2, what I'm going to do, just what I thought of over here, I'm going to say, oh, A equals D. So I'm going to write that out. Angle A is congruent to angle D, and the reason for that is because vertical angles are congruent. Or you know what, you can write shorthand if you want. Vertical angles are congruent, like that. So I see that angle A equals angle D because vertical angles are congruent. Now this is where the steps get people get a little bit confused. They start throwing all kinds of logic and reasoning out here, and if your statements are in the wrong order, it's hard for the person that's grading it or trying to read it to understand. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight. I look up here at these things, that, and I say to myself, oh, well, if that's true, then I know right away that angle E is congruent to angle D, because I can see right away that would follow by the transitive property. So take a look up what the transitive property means, and you'll see that. So I'm just going to write transitive property. And see, that follows straight from the two statements above it, so it's very easy to follow what's being said. Okay, now step 4, I'm going to say, well, I know angle E and H are equal to each other. Angle E is congruent to angle H. And again, why is that? Well, that's because vertical angles are congruent. Same reason, but I write it again so that people know where I came up with that. I have to justify what I'm saying every time I say a statement. I have to give a reason, a justification. Well, same thing. I'm going to do the same thing that I just did before, which namely is that if those things are true, I know, step 5, that angle D is congruent to angle H, and that's by the transitive property. Once again, and you can see in 5 simple steps, I clearly laid out the proof that they were asking me to do. And it's very simple to follow, and there's not confusing words or confusing reasoning. I'm not making anyone's head spin by what I'm doing. Everything follows from the previous 1 or 2 or 3 statements that I had given previously, and it's very easy to follow. So that would be a good example of a 2-column proof.